It's my honor to introduce this year's Parker Lecturer. As soon as Reverend Julian DeShazier was suggested as a possible speaker for this morning, we knew that he was just the perfect person to give the lecture. Then I found out that I had been in his church many times because when I was at the University of Chicago, it was the center of many things, including many meetings on civil rights in Vietnam, and also the best, longest-running folk music site, I think, in Chicago, personally. And I just discovered it's still going on. Reverend DeShazier is the senior pastor at the University Church, pretty much on the University of Chicago campus. He is a minister, a social justice advocate, and an artist whose innovative approach, with an innovative approach to changing lives. Under the name of J.K. West, he is an Emmy-winning hip-hop artist featured in the video Strange Fruit. He is also a faculty member at the McCormick Theological Seminary in the University of Chicago Divinity School, which we call the D School in Hyde Park. But before that, he was a graduate of Morehouse College in Atlanta. In 2018, he was recognized by the Center for American Progress as one of 10 faith leaders to watch, and by Crain's Chicago Business as one of 40 leaders under 40 in the city. Julian was instrumental in establishing an adult trauma center on the south side of Chicago and currently serves on the University of Chicago Medicine Community Advisory Council. He's just joined the board of directors of Sojourners and is a regular contributor to that magazine, as well as the On Scripture, HuffPost publications, and others. He has appeared on ABC, Fox, NPR, and Dr. Maya Angelou's Oprah and Friends radio program. We are really eager to hear your unique perspective on the importance of music, media, social justice, and activism. So I present to you the 2019 Parker Lecturer, Reverend Julian DeShazier.
You want to come help present the plaque? Sorry to interrupt the flow. We got to make sure you get the commemorated. Turn around.
Oh, okay.
Turn around. We're in a picture. Awesome. Thank you.
I want to thank you for that introduction, for this invitation to lead us all in a short discussion. To the honorees, congratulations. This is hardly nothing. Shout out to GMMP and Caden. I hope they see you coming. See the situation. See how people tell your story, how they quick to crush you. How so many in your shoes choose complaining. Look at how racist. Look at Trump. That ain't doing nothing. See the world changing? I don't really know, but it's a new opening for us through communication to a new becoming. I remember feeling young and being displaced. How is this home being chased over fences running? Black boy on the ground over senseless nothing. Wherever I is Chicago making a different kind of statement. You looking at me like, would you please stop rapping so I can hear what he's saying? American way to reject another language. American angst. Try to hear what I'm saying. I'm saying that day won't come until we make it. Beloved, I am so glad to be here this morning. I am so honored to be here with you all in this room with so many great minds and hearts, all aligned toward upholding with integrity this critical and sacred vocation of storytelling. That is what links us all, journalists, writers, social media savants, posters, preachers, producers. We are storytellers. And there's a proverb that comes from the Hopi people. Those who tell stories rule the world. Now, coming up on the south side of Chicago, I would hear that differently, right? Telling stories meant something different. That was what you called lying, telling stories, because as a child, you couldn't say that an adult was lying, even if you knew they were. You had to say that they were telling stories. Some people are from a tradition of telling stories, and some people are storytellers, carriers of wisdom and power across generations. With the recent Washington Post story, I'm sure y'all saw it, indicating that President Trump has told over 13,000 lies in less than 1,000 days. That is prolific. The Hopi proverb then becomes tragically ironic. Those who tell stories rule the world. What they knew, what we know, is the power of a story. Certainly in a room like this, it doesn't bear repeating. It's why my Morehouse brother prodded Dr. Everett Parker to do something about the coverage of the civil rights movement, because the story was wrong. The story must be right, not only because we don't want to be accused of telling stories, but also once a thing has happened, it becomes a matter of the past. And the past, this is where I want to spend my time this morning, in this thing we call the past. And to do this, if there are any other multilingual people here, you will understand that the problem with English is that it flattens the meaning of words. It's kind of a cultural violence, really, English, if you think about it, what it does to peoples and cultures across this world when we take their words and flatten them. Because in English, the past means back then. It happened. It is disconnected from us. It is distinct. It's boring. It's a matter of record. It's a matter of history. The word we want to use as faith and communications folks is not past, but Sankofa. Say that word, Sankofa. It comes from the Akan people of Ghana as a parable. A young bird named Sankofa is raised in a village where she is loved and held and praised and told that she can do anything. The world is in front of her, and so she decides to leave her village. Let's go see this world, she says. And while she's out flying high, chest up, she runs into Big Bird. And the Big Bird is this big, menacing, big old thing. You can tell in a pack of birds who's in charge. And it was clear to Sankofa that Big Bird was the one in charge. Big Bird saw Sankofa in her confidence flying and zooming past and said, "You ugly. You know you ugly, right? You know you're not supposed to be flying this high up here with us. You know that. You know you're ugly and you shouldn't be flying this high, right? Go away." Big Bird insults her. Every time he sees her flying past, he insults her and reminds her of the same thing. You don't belong here. You are ugly, until finally Sankofa regrets leaving and goes back to her village. Maybe Big Bird is right. Maybe I don't belong out here. She goes home, and when she does, she connects again with these same folks who don't love her any less. In fact, they remind her again how much they love her, how much she can do anything. They send her out again, but then they send her with directions. Don't forget us this time. Don't forget who you are. And newly confident, she goes back out, back toward her destiny, and now Big Bird is gone. The lesson becomes an African proverb. It is not taboo to go back and fetch that which you have forgotten. Or put it another way, you can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. The proverb becomes a word, Sankofa. And the word becomes an image, a bird with its feet facing forward, but its head turned backwards. To move forward rightly, one must always be looking backwards. That's what it means. The past directs the way forward. Sankofa reminds us that the past and the future are tied together, but destiny is not only a matter of will and strength and deciding you want to do it, but knowing where you and your people have been. What that creates in us because of the past, an identity that is formed through the past, which means that the story must be told, it must be told well, and it must be told rightly. Sankofa is what reminds embattled people, forgotten people, disinherited people who traverse a sky full of big birds, the big bird of xenophobia, the big bird of poverty, the big bird of corporatized education, of militarized peacekeeping. Big Bird does not want you to have your story, because with your story comes your identity, and with an anchored sense of being, no thing and no one can get in your way. Sankofa is our reminder that stories carry within them the power to make people and the power to remove them altogether. The power of life and death. The problem with telling stories, lying then, is clear. Owning a story allows you to change people's destinies. This is why last names were changed for people entering America via the slave ship or via Ellis Island. This is why it was a crime for a black person to read 200 years ago, because they might learn the story. This is why that last name of mine that is so hard to pronounce traces back to a history that can only go back to 1863, but no further. Control the narrative of a people, and you will control those people. 18 Million Rising, the Global Media Monitoring Project, they understand that when you give a story back to your people, when you tell the people who are telling the story, we watching you. Then those people come alive in ways that are beyond bone and sinew and flesh and fat and muscles and moles and places we didn't think moles should ever grow. Then those people get spirit. They get self-determination. They get what Dr. Maulana Karenga called Kuji Chagalia. All this in a story about the past. In 1921, the black people of Tulsa, Oklahoma, had a district of businesses and markets and theaters and banks and hotels, self-sufficiency, independence. It was called Black Wall Street. A real thing with real people. It actually happened. And one of these people, a 19-year-old black shoeshine boy, goes into a building, they say to use the bathroom, enters an elevator where the operator is a 17-year-old white woman, them alone. The white woman leaves the elevator, files a complaint against the boy, and he gets arrested. He sits in jail. The Tulsa Tribune headlined the next day, "Negro nabbed for attacking girl in elevator." They used the word assault in the article. A lynch mob forms outside the jail. Unable to lynch, they then decide to attack every man, woman, and child who is not white, and they decide to burn down Black Wall Street. The police gave them weapons to do it. But the use of the word assault in the article is what riled everybody up when storytellers start telling stories. The Tulsa World reported a day later, in fact, if the facts as the police had been told had only been printed, I do not think there would have been any riot whatever. The lie in print that burned down Black Wall Street. The lie that killed Emmett Till. The lie that killed Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland. The same Tulsa World, 3 days later, printed an editorial called Bad Niggers. When the story is told wrong, what happens to Sankofa? But when the story is not told at all, when the story is omitted. There's that book, Lies Our Teachers Told Us. We need a book called Stories We Were Never Told at All. There are kids across this country who have never heard of Black Wall Street, including in Tulsa, where the teaching the story is still not mandatory. You can do it if you want to, and most choose not to. Where after 98 years, the government of Tulsa finally decided to search for mass graves a few weeks ago. If you must tell the story, fine. If you insist, the status quo says, but a dangerous story is best left untold. The feet move forward in the same direction that the head is turned backwards. So when a story is told wrong, now you see. But when a story is not told at all, Sankofa is impossible. The story of violence in urban cities tells us who is dying and who is killing, but not who is supplying and who is winning. Who profits from filled jails? Who profits and who loses when this, not Black Wall Street, but this is the story of Black men and women in America. My mama told me not to call nobody a liar, but the people who rule the world are telling stories. And it's a story that's killing us. How then do we respond when stories go missing? The curious case of the abduction of Black identity and women's independence and migrant rights, all abduction cases that follow the same pattern of the most famous abduction case in human history. The one which, if we can solve, may help us solve all the rest. His name was Jesus. And he was born in Bethlehem, but raised in Nazareth. He was Jewish through and through. He made enemies by healing when he wasn't supposed to heal, by telling those that were cursed and considered cursed and damned by society that they were in fact beloved. He changed their stories without permission from the state-sponsored storytellers. He challenged the empire and was killed for sedition, noun, conduct or speech, inciting people to rebel against the authority of the state. That's what he was killed for. How is it an abduction, you ask, when somebody is already dead? Your brain is working this morning. You haven't even had 10 cups of coffee yet. Look at you. The abduction occurred centuries later, when the center of a religion named after this man moved from Jerusalem to the capital of the most powerful empire that the world had known to that point. And in moving from Jerusalem to Rome, the story went missing. It was a theft when the religion of a Jewish prophet founded out of concerns for displaced Arab people was turned into a religion of triumphalism. It was a theft when Jesus died for our freedom got turned into Jesus died for our sins. It was a theft when, as the theologian Caseman said it best, the preaching of Jesus became preaching about Jesus, thus losing its entire content and its earthly content and completing the abduction. Jesus went from being Jerusalem's zealot to Rome's chaplain. Who benefits from the story being told this way? Who benefits when we talk about Jesus but never talk about what Jesus talked about? Then the people for whom Jesus came, the ones in the margins, the oppressed ones, the ones with no options, the disinherited ones, have no revolutionary fuel because it's not their story anymore. Then we can enslave them. Then we can control bodies in the name of family values. Then we can incarcerate anybody who doesn't look like us. They scare us because they don't look like this Jesus. Who you think came through bringing all them rifles? Same people came bringing all the Bibles. If you want to control a people, take their story, change their hero, and give it back to them, then the corrupted memory will wreak havoc. inside those people, causing such chaos inside existentially that those inside will beg to lose their identity, to give the story back, to be like you, seeing no other course for their survival. But I thank God for the work of our ancestors, of Katie Cannon, of Gustavo Gutierrez, Howard Thurman, Oscar Romero, Dorothy Day, who noticed the inconsistencies of the story. Somebody here is lying, and have worked not to recover the historical Jesus, but what James Cone called the scandalous gospel. Cone said the scandal is that the gospel means liberation, that this liberation comes for the poor, and that it gives them the strength and courage to break the conditions of servitude. When the gospel is an artifact of the past as a matter of history, the gospel cannot do that. But when it is Sankofa, then, wherever we are, as writers or bloggers or pastors or rappers, we are keepers of a story gone missing, fact checkers of a story told wrongly, storytellers in a world of people telling stories. You say to them, you may be in power now, but when my people get their story back, when we remember Sankofa, Miroslav Volf talks about the only way to break a cycle of oppression and suffering and violence is through memory. Sankofa. Elie Wiesel, without memory, there is no culture. Without memory, there would be no civilization, no society, no future. Sankofa. The Torah is a written record of what happened, recited and inscribed into the memory as a way of moving forward. Sankofa. In Joshua, now you can't come to church and not hear scripture, right? In Joshua, God says, look, Joshua, I know you're nervous, but that's because Moses was Moses, and there will never be another Moses, but you are Joshua, and Moses didn't have a Moses to build on. You have a Moses who is your ancestor and a part of your story. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. We have been in this moment before. And then he says to him in chapter 3, verse 7, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. Sankofa. What is our call? With all due respect to Sesame Street, it is to defy Big Bird. What is our job? To be keepers of the story, to tell them right, and to tell them well, to shine a light on abductors, to disallow that stories are only about what happened back then, to name that stories make people, to tell stories that remake the world, to empower people to tell their own story and not pretend that we have to do it for them. To know that people have within them, no matter how disinherited, the power to tell their story rightly and to tell it well. And we must empower them to do this. What is at stake? Life and death. This is why journalists are under attack right now. To cause your credibility to come into question and then question every story that you tell. It keeps the lie breathing. Big Bird said to Sankofa, you know your story is fake news, right? But Sankofa wouldn't listen. Sankofa knew what was right. How could she listen to Big Bird with so much at stake? How could you not be weary right now? How could you not be upset? How could you not be angry? How could you not want to write and attack everything? But please, for my sake, for my daughter's sake, please don't stop. You might think you're a blogger, a freelancer, a poster, a tweeter, a photographer, a publisher, a program director, a producer, a bureaucrat, a lawyer, a host, an intern. But never forget this. You are a storyteller. Those who tell stories rule the world, but God will see after the storytellers. God bless you and thank you.